Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast on this beautiful Friday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. I'm so excited that you're here. Hope the birds are singing. Hope the sun is shining. Hope the wind is at your back. Live from the edge of the psychedelic apocalypse where law meets mysticism in a blaze of legal DMT. Comrades, consciousness pirates, mushroom mystics, do not adjust your perception. Do not consult the clerk because what's about to walk through this dimension is not just a lawyer, it's a revelation. Eric Postow, Esquire II, High Commander of Holon Law Partners, Diplomat to the Invisible Realms, and Barrister of the Blessed Sacraments. Not born, unleashed, forged in the fires of regulation and religious liberty, tattooed in the ink of constitutional bloodlines. This man does not merely interpret the law, he bends it like a prayer. He breaks it like a fever, and he builds new ones with the elegance of a psychedelic architect sketching temples and court briefs. They tried to put him in a box, but he smoked that box, distilled it into hemp extract, filed it as a 501c3, and turned it into a sacred beverage served at shamanic shareholder meetings. Eric Postow, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm blown away by that. Those are so wildly authentic and awesome, and I appreciate it. I'll make a few
Please.
lawyerly statements that I don't help anyone break the law. My role is to help people understand their legal frameworks in layers, and I work in highly regulated and emerging regulated spaces. I have a religious freedoms practice, and I've been in the psychedelic legal space since 2015, and really watched a lot of changes in the last decade. So grateful and privileged to be able to think about these issues, and so happy to be back with you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm excited you're here. You're doing some interesting work out there. And beyond that, like the name Holon, you and I were talking briefly afterwards. And if you have that book behind you, maybe you could hold it up because I think it underscores exactly so much of what you're doing, what you're based on, and what we're kind of going through here today. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to do a very short book report. So this book is The Ghost in the Machine. It's by Arthur Koestler. He is a 20th century thinker, philosopher, professor, and he wrote about the reality of the universe through systems theory approach. And he's the first to describe Holon as a concept, as a system, as a process, and it's Holon Law Partners, and the name derives directly from that, and it takes on the meaning. Holon means a whole part that is part of a transcendent state through its collaboration with other whole parts. So a whole part, you, and a whole part, me, come together, and what emerges is this interview. We've designed our system off of that, and it's very effective in a pragmatic business sense. It's also, in my mind, a smart way to align with the kind of the nature of reality, that everything works this way, and it's through relationships, connectivity, where new things can emerge from. And it's in those new things, those transcendent things, where real change, real impact is available. And so thanks for recognizing the book. It's a very meaningful book to me personally, and to our firm. So glad I could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, me too. I think it speaks to this idea of an emerging awareness, Eric. Like I see it, both you and I run in some similar circles, and in the psychedelic world that we see today that's kind of emerging, it seems with it is emerging a new awareness, the ghost in the machine on some level, and we're beginning to recognize it. What are your thoughts on the new awareness and just the state of the psychedelic movement today?
Well, I think, to talk about anything is to recognize a few things.
Okay.
Nothing exists in a vacuum, right? Psychedelics, conceptually and theoretically and legally, doesn't exist unto itself. It exists in a larger collection of experience and things. And our human experience, historically, temporally, religiously, spiritually, has been a development along an awareness continuum, from less aware of reality to more aware of reality, to from more primitive, oriented life, the what's happening right now in the present, the experience, the survival, into more developed communities and relationships, and then collaborations, so on and so forth, thereby creating societies, et cetera, et cetera. And we're on that continuum historically. So kind of the purpose of life, in some sense, is the development of awareness of who we are individually, awareness of who we are relationally, and then awareness of the greater goings on all around us, what that bright thing in the sky is, towards naming it. It's a star, it has certain properties, it does certain things, it's interacting with me somehow, whether just visually or some other way. And then we develop learning from those things to answer questions and to make ourselves more aware. Psychedelics is a great lens by which we can observe the whole thing. We can talk about the experience of it. We can talk about the legalities of it. We can talk about the socio-cultural, historical aspects of it. But fundamentally, psychedelics, plant medicines, natural medicines, fungi medicines that produce altered states of consciousness, which is another way of saying it allows you to view reality differently. And from that new awareness, the experience itself, you become a little bit more informed about something. What is that something? Maybe it's about yourself. Maybe it's about relationships. For some people, maybe there's not a great learning occurrence. I don't know. Every person's experience seems to be very unique, and yet there seems to be some commonality across the board in some way. Things like interconnection, relationship, understanding of self, and this thing called awareness. That I think is a very important aspect to the question. May have gone off on a directional tangent, so bring me back to reality where you're at.
Well, I think it's a beautiful answer. And to me, it brings up the question of as someone who's working with the law around these substances, a lot of the words we hear, a lot of the terms we hear are awareness, ineffable. It seems like it presents a very difficult challenge for someone who's navigating the bureaucratic landscape to bring these substances and sort of fit them into a legal framework. Is that like a challenging thing to do? How do you navigate that?
It depends what you're trying to do.
Okay.
And so what does that mean? It depends what your intentions are.
Okay.
Psychedelics wasn't discovered by the West.
Right.
Of
course.
Psychedelics in their natural forms have been used ceremonially, ritually, socially, for thousands and thousands of years by human populations on every continent, maintained over that time, in many instances, by the original holders of the medicine, the people that learned the properties of the plant, or the fungi, or the root, or the secretion, or whatever. And the cultures developed from that. Cultures built around the relationship of the individual people and the medicines and the community and things like that. So inseparable and typically tied to a place, because it's the natural medicines of a place, right?
Yeah.
Humans also trade with each other and have interconnected and related to each other for thousands of years, and certainly traded medicines historically. And I believe that our archaeological records would support this in many different ways. So the idea that a medicine that is originally from, South America somehow is being consumed in the northern part of the continent, this likely could have been the case for thousands of years, and just not documented, and in some cases documented. But so I think that's an important thing. So when you're talking about psychedelics, you're talking about a very old thing, a very old shared communal experiential consumption of something. Enter in the United States now. We're not talking about the rest of the world, but the same rules apply. And the United States historically has suppressed the traditional medicines, and tried to separate land connections from indigenous tribes. And, since the medicine was so, integral to the whole, if you could sever those relationships, you did it. Now, how did it happen? It happened through the spirit mind, through forced conversion to Catholicism and other Western accepted religions, and then eventually prohibition of certain types of, medicine. And then that got, warped in the drug war and conflated with, narcotics created by people that are harmful, that aren't part of a community, that don't have a history in the same ways, at least not in their synthesized form, their manufactured form, right?
Yeah.
So that has clouded everything, because now we have to view everything through that lens. So now you enter the Controlled Substance Act, and there's where all the complexity around how do you balance the original, traditional, religious, cultural, societal, indigenous uses,
right,
within this world. And we've had cases that our religious freedoms were limited by the Supreme Court. And those religious freedoms of using traditional medicines weren't protected from employment terminations. Then we have the Religious Freedoms Restoration Act and similar acts related to sovereign Indian tribe medicine in the peyote church and things like that. And then we had the continuation of migration of medicine from south to north through ayahuasca trade, but not just to trade. The trade is actually a wrong word. I want to kind of remove trade as a word to focus on. The spread of the syncretic indigenous Christian hybridized religion from places like Brazil, the vegetile churches, Biocentro cases, and the RFRA's clear protection of that right. Okay. And so from that religious freedoms perspective, we now have people finding religion, finding experience, wanting to preserve and protect that religious experience. And you run into the issue of community safety and the true role of government, which is to protect the community from itself sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's the current climate. And now you enter the states following the cannabis path. States like Oregon, Colorado, which have implemented regulated psilocybin therapeutic wellness, Western in some sense, certainly hybridized, and maybe some misappropriation or appropriation. I don't know. Depends how you think about it. But certainly a new regulated space here and in Colorado, an even more expansive space than Oregon that accounts for the religiosity aspects of these things, and that medicine holders in the religious context could be equally as viable and valuable as the medicine holders in the therapeutic wellness medicine side. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And then we have divergence of policy initiatives through legislation across the state. So we're seeing a really rapid transition. But I think it is important to kind of acknowledge that's the landscape. There's a soup of a lot of different histories and things going on and social contexts. It makes it very difficult to talk about because we want to talk about things in a linear kind of way. And this is a very non-linear kind of thing. Did that answer any of your question?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think it speaks volumes of the nuances and the complications and the soup that is messy sometimes. You know, there's so many different lenses to see it through and so many responsibilities to try to do it. It kind of makes me begin to think that, you know, maybe when things get too big, they get put away because it's just too complicated. There's too many hands in the pie. There's too many regulations. There's too many things going on. So sometimes when things become so complex, they get put back away. And I know there seems to be sort of that going on right now. Like there's this sort of debate between legalization and decriminalization. Curious, do you have any thoughts on that sort of debate? Do you lean on one side, or are there pluses and minuses for both sides? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Can you frame the question again, just so I can focus on it?
What do you have any thoughts on the future of psychedelics? Would it be better to decriminalize them or to legalize them?
I think in terms of the intentionality again, I think when you profit, you incentivize the profit motive in psychedelics, you're doing something that is potentially harmful. And psychedelics are a very powerful, transformative tool.
Yeah.
When done poorly, when done without intentionality, without setting, integration, without support, in unhealthy ways, in abusive ways, that is bad for society.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, you have to account for that reality I described, that there's already a human right, a core human right to the natural medicines of this world, and that we've had a historic human relationship with those medicines that goes back to our very beginnings. And this is an inescapable truth. And so when we put a layer of structure, which is a legal framework, is a layer of structure around something that just is, you know, it's bound to break through that thing. It can't be contained like that because it's just a part of our. So you leave open the reality that that this is also true. So how do you account for community safety? How do you account for the clear harmful things, the bad actors in any space that want to chase money and don't know what the heck they're doing, but they say they do, and they have other toxic traits about them, you know, that make them a poor representation of the honest and high character historically within the natural medicine world. I think that we should reflect on what does the bad look like. You know, come to some kind of a consensus on what are the true community harms that we want to mitigate against, and let's leave open that we are a transitional era here, and transformation is happening that you can't necessarily prevent people from experiencing life. You know, if someone wants to consume a mushroom for an experience, they're going to consume a mushroom for the experience. If that is contained in a religious perspective, let's suppose a Christian church had integrated some form of psilocybin into its Christian experience of the root Christianity that it is providing. Now, this is not to say yes, no, maybe. This is just to hypotheticalize what. Let's suppose that. Is that a good thing? If it falls under a container that has structure, that has a lineage in and of itself, that is also historically syncretic and integrating and changing in its form all the time. That's why we have so many Christian denominations, that it's going to continue. It just always does that. And also other containers that are religious oriented, perhaps Buddhist, perhaps multi-religious, perhaps non-religious at all, therapeutic, wellness, clinical, psychological. You know, you can imagine that there's lots of containers where the community could say, yeah, I feel good that this Christian church is taking this seriously and has good risk mitigation, emergency procedures, shows care and concern, is reaching a person using their teachings, the things that are relatable to a person's core beliefs, if they're a Christian, or if they're a Jewish, Muslim, or Buddhist, or Hindu, or whatever it is, whatever someone's core belief, if that is reaching them and connecting also, and this tool is part of that happening, wouldn't we at the community level say that feels good compared to the alternative of you know, we have no idea where these controls are coming in. Some people are just doing it and not putting any thought into it, and you know, not doing any integrative work on the other end, not, you know, making sure someone was safe throughout the experience, not knowing when to get real help if you were in a situation where you someone's life is at risk, their health is at risk. You know, so, you know, keen judgment and discernment important there. You know, so this is the world. It's so complicated, but you can start to imagine it that way to ask the bigger questions.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time to be here at this space now. I got a couple people chiming in the chat over here, Eric, and the first one comes to us from Ryan. Ryan from Oceanside says, "Can the law protect what it cannot define, like spirit, soul, or healing?"
So the law doesn't go out and say what a religion is. In a lot of sense, it says that it wants to protect your deeply held religious beliefs, and that's your First Amendment. So what is a religion? This is the personal question. There's organized religion, there's decentralized religion, there is personal religiosity, you know, your core spiritual beliefs. And in furtherance of that, we here in this country want to protect that under our First Amendment, and then we want to protect it under our RFRA, and then we want federal, and then we want to protect it under our various state level RFRAs, if we have them. And so, you know, there are lots of religious beliefs about soul and spirit, and what, you know, I guess that question is the spiritual question, like what in pursuit of that core concept, what's happening? What are you doing? Are there rituals involved? Are there ceremonies involved? Are people involved besides yourself? What happens when those people get involved? What do they do? If they're using a sacrament, are they being safe? What does safe mean? Reasonable standards, right? What people expect in our community that is safe, and so on and so forth. And then the responsibility that we owe to each other in those spaces. So, you know, if I invited you into my sacred circle to serve you medicine and to help you with this spiritual quest that you're on, and this is what you're doing. I owe you. I have a duty of care to you. I'm taking you into my hands, and I'm doing something with you, for you, and I'm obligated to make sure that I keep you safe and okay, and not molested, right?
Yeah.
Not harmed. That if something's happening to you that requires medical attention, that I get that for you right then and there, and that I handle myself, responsibly for those types of things. So I think that's an important frame. I don't know if that answered his question, but
Yeah, I think so. It was a beautiful answer. Thanks, Ryan, for chiming in. We got LinkedIn coming in over here. They said, the magic word you said was intent. The shadow makes the obvious invisible. The law should simply say that before any journey, a small invocation must be made. Shamans are in this world to protect during the returning. Any thoughts on that, Eric?
I'm reading it. Yeah, I don't know if the law should say anything about it, because you don't want the law to start defining how to do your religious practice. What you want the law to say is you're obligated to keep people safe.
Yeah.
And that, I think at the heart of your question is, am I protected for my religious freedoms? And the answer is yes, to a point. You have the protections to your religious beliefs, and you can pursue those beliefs protected under law, and in the cases and in the federal law that I've described, and in the First Amendment. You have the right to pursue that religious experience, and then there's the I guess what you might call the transactional occurrence of doing this with other people and in a larger setting, or doing this in a way that was safer by accounting for things that are harms,
Right.
and mitigating against those kind of concepts. I would always advise anyone, talk to a lawyer before you do anything. And this is not legal advice. This is
Right.
This is my these are my thoughts and observations from seeing lots of different variations.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm stoked to hear the perspective. This one we got coming in from Betsy. Betsy says, if an altered state produces truth, can it be submitted as evidence?
So the truth, I guess, is your knowingness that it's true. Yeah, I suppose I don't know what evidence for what, but what happened to Moses at the burning bush? God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. So there was an experience happening. This is in the Christian and Jewish Bible, I think, I don't know about the Quran, but in Western religion, Abrahamic. So the occurrence, the happening, the burning bush, some symbolic, real occurrence, some kind of experience. His divine presence is being felt. Truth is revealed. So it's a revelation. And actions on the other side to live within that revelation, to live closer to God. Was it Abraham in the burning bush? Moses? I forget. One of them. Sorry. Someone would correct me. But you get my point that yes, truth can be evidenced. In that case, it was evidenced before a group of people. Hey, this is what God says. This is how to live life. This is how I'm going to live life. I invite you to live life like this, because we all believe this. This is the right. This is God, and this is what we're doing. So today, truth could very well be revealed. But what does truth mean, and who does it mean it to? If it's a personal truth, if it's a knowingness truth, but there are potentially universal truths. There is, the universe works a certain way. We observe this in science. We can see that it works a particular way. We're aware, again, on that continuum over time of how the universe works. We have to describe it. We have physics, we have astronomy, we have spirituality, we have lots of things to describe the nature of reality. But in truth, it does operate a particular way, whether we can say what it is or not, whether we're wrong about what we're saying is, and at some point in the future, it becomes revealed, truth becomes revealed. So in a sense, back to our awareness piece, the awareness is the revelation of truth, the awareness of truth. And then something transforms within you because you became more aware at all.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm curious, Eric. I know with cannabis, like there started to be a whole legal framework sort of around it, which you were a huge part of, and moving into psychedelics. It seems that there's a burgeoning field of like a psychedelic lawyers and a guild. Like, what's going on there? Like, what are you guys talking about when you guys get together, and how is it shaping up?
There's so many brilliant lawyers working in the space.
Nice.
I'm very fortunate to be in relationship with a number of them. The Psychedelic Bar Association is a wonderful organization.
Yeah.
It was founded by brilliant people that cared a whole lot about these things. And I sit on the religious use committee. And again, it's a collection of really wonderful people who are great lawyers and legal professionals that want to come together to think about this kind of stuff. And that's the tradition of American law, that the lawyers find themselves that want to be on the front of something that's changing and learn about it together. So I'm very privileged to be able to work around those folks and learn from them as well.
What kind of conversation you guys having in there, or can you talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly in transition, and there's lots of different groups within it. Some folks think more about policy and legislation, and some groups think more about those things, and other groups more about the pragmatic business concepts, licensing, and things like that. And then there's the more, I guess, the spiritual, philosophical, religious concepts. And giving voice to that very, core original use frame. So I think it just depends. There's a lot of issues going on, and I think we've just together been discovering through observing and working within this transformative wave,
right?
And the ability to start identifying, I think, things that are more healthy for society, things that are less healthy, to be able to voice that so that decision makers can be informed and have more awareness themselves. And hopefully the laws and legislation will reflect a more complete picture, a more informed picture, a more holistic picture. That was wandering, but I think that's kind of the arc of the conversation over time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of interesting events. Like Texas just sort of came up with a pretty big decision on ibogaine. And it's interesting. I was looking at I think Dennis Walker put out a post that they were talking about the win in ibogaine in Texas, but then they also showed these pictures of like iboga that you could buy, like sort of like a candy bar on some level. And I think that harkens back to the ideas we were talking about, it being messy. When you start looking at these big, what are your thoughts on that?
I think back to the profit motive. If the intention is money, we're probably going to run into problems. If the goal is money, if the goal is a diversified portfolio, and now I want to sell psilocybin chocolate bars at the hemp product store, that's obviously ripe for risk. Control features on who gets it and how they use it and what happens. Yeah, it's up to the individual, but that's not a good idea. It is a good idea for access, safe access. So I think that's the real heart of what we would want to hopefully see from my perspective. Protected access.
Yeah.
Protections for those traditional, cultural, social uses, the religious, so that folks that are, properly relating to these medicines in the community and thinking about the overall welfare of people are also the ones that are serving these types of things. War, a regulated space, I think that should continue. I don't have any problem with that. I think it's necessary that our Western medicine integrate these things and become more effective as a result in the right ways. Ketamine therapy is a very promising area that I see problems and opportunities. So yeah, I think it starts and ends kind of with intention, and that if it's all about the money, you're not thinking about the right stuff.
I love that answer. I'm a big fan. I'm a Gen Xer, so I grew up kind of catching the echoes of the '60s and listening to the Doors and just being drawn in by those magnificent Fillmore East posters and all like that incredible artwork. But all of that seems to talk about rebellion to me. When I can't, for me, my personal opinion is I can't separate psychedelics from rebellion, and maybe not like a full out rebellion against government or something like that, but a rebellion against a system that's no longer working on some level. I'm kind of seeing that happening a little bit now in the psychedelic space, where we're kind of pushing back against industries that may not have the best interest of the individuals in mind. Do you see that relationship there, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so now I'm going to bring us back to kind of my original thought that nothing is occurring in a vacuum. So you should also reflect on what's the other really transformational thing happening right now in real time in society across the globe. It's AI.
Yeah.
And AI is another really important tool that allows us to observe ourselves, because we see how AI is converging with everything and transforming it. Therefore, we're all transforming. And again, it's about awareness. It makes us more aware in a lot of ways. It performs tasks. It does these types of things. So you have to understand with AI that in real time, we're transforming. So we're in, again, when I say transitional era, that is what we're in.
Yeah.
We're transitioning. You can see it if you're paying attention to global politics. You can see it with the emphasis of this administration on I don't know, is it dismantling, upending, changing, transforming the kind of the global structures, the global lines? It's in the form of tariffs. That's how we see tariff as a concept, but it's about disruption of the way things have been, which means that there's going to be a future where it's altered, it's changed, it's transformed somehow. And we're living through that transitional transformation period. AI is driving a lot of that. Whether anyone would say it like that or not, I don't know, but it's what I observe, that AI is going to transform how we work, how we live, how we play, how we connect, how we learn, and fundamentally can make us more aware of ourselves and the world around us. Same concept in psychedelics.
Yeah.
Transformation, transition. The power of these tools to usher in really impactful personal transformation, which is where it all starts.
Yeah.
Knowing who you are as a person, as a human being, knowing who you are in relationship to the world around you, to your spirit, mind, whatever. This self-awareness and this transformation that's happening at a personal, individual level, that's happening in the coupling and in the grouping and in the communitizing and in the societizing, on and on and on and on and on and on. This is happening also. So I think that, the future is for the making right now, for the creating, for the people that want to see change because they want to live on a healthy planet. Right? Would anyone disagree with that? We all want to live on a healthy planet. If the planet is not healthy, we are not healthy. This is a true statement. Okay, so what do we do about it? Nobody knows. Right? But perhaps with shifting of perspectives, we might acknowledge the relationship to begin with, that there is a relationship between us and the planet's health somehow, and that we can transform the way we live to live more co-creatively. This will not happen overnight, but it's a mindset. It's an intention starter. And I think that that's something to observe, and a lot of room for optimism, but a lot of room for reality checking that, there's different interests. Some interests are more selfish. Other interests are more pro-social. I don't know. Pro more than one, not selfish. Selfish from a different direction. I don't know.
Yeah, it's well said. Yeah. Who do we got coming in over here? We got, let's see, this one is coming from, who's coming from? Desiree. Desiree, thanks for being here. She says, is breaking a broken law the highest form of fidelity to justice?
That's a philosophical and political question. People have broken laws for the higher form of justice historically. There is such a thing as bad law, right? There is such a laws can have harmful consequences. The question is, what do you do about it? Breaking it can bring attention to it, but what needs to happen isn't the breaking; it's the acknowledging that it's being broken, and that it's going to continue to be broken, and that the laws need to reflect the true free will of the people, in our country anyway. Freedom is what we're after, and when the law becomes an oppressive tool, this is called lawfare. When law becomes an oppressive tool, and in the instance where a government oppresses the citizenry that makes it, that's incoherent in our country. We have to do something about that. We have to think about the value propositions. We have to understand who we're really trying to be. Is it more important that we punish a person for working around being in relation to making money from a plant? Is it more important that we do that and put people in jail for nonviolent crimes because of their affinity for the plant, while maintaining a lie that the plant has no medicinal value? A lie. It's at this point beyond fathomable. There is no room for doubt that it has medicinal value. It has established medicinal value, and the United States government has profited from this through its patents and licensing of cannabinoids from cannabis. And yet we try people, we convict people, and we send people to jail. And the great crime was working around a plant. So in that sense, and the will of the people as expressed through the political momentum, Pew polls, the voting patterns of people across the country, the legislative bodies, and the reflection of the will of the people through those, is moving towards acknowledging the value of this plant and making it available and accessible, and then reasonably regulating it to make sure that it is as safe as it could be for what it is. So that's incoherency. That can't be the way we do things, because it's oppression. And the citizens here are free enough to say, we don't like that. We don't want to be oppressed by you, government, which we made and formed and created and give all the power to. We are the ones in charge. That's the we the people concept. So I think that using the process, the democratic process, is the way we agreed to do it in this country, or at least we were born into, and that's our system. And I think that the best way to be involved is to get involved and highlight these types of oppressive things and demand change and vote for change on those things. And even folks that aren't interested in the plant itself can recognize the fundamental problem we have in our country right now regarding that plant and its status and the inability of government to do what's obvious is a confounding, and it transcends one administration. This is administration after administration after administration, failure to address this type of thing, and it has harmful consequences, and we just accept that.
Yeah, it's true. You've been in the game for a long time, Eric. Do you see the laws around cannabis as precedent for the laws around psychedelics?
No. I think from some sense that the plant medicines, cannabis is a plant medicine.
Yeah.
So botanical medicines as a category, yes. Fungi medicines, yeah. I mean, in some sense, we're trajectorying that way, but each thing is unique enough that it requires its own thinking, and it's also consumed very differently. Cannabis can be a daily consumed product. Yeah. Most people aren't consuming psychedelics daily like that. It's not addictive, according to the research out there, in the same ways. And I'm not an expert on this, so if someone knows research that says it is, I'm not here to argue. But I believe that it's not addictive, and it's really relatively low consumption. Somebody might use it one time and never again because the experience was what it needed to be and did what it was hoped for. Other people might return to it as needed. Other people might consume it more regularly than that, and I'm not here to tell anybody how to live their life. But I don't think it's the same thing as the vast majority of the cannabis marketplace, which is about daily consumption of a consumer product in multitude of forms. But daily consumption of cannabinoids is different than daily consumption of psilocybin or DMT or whatever else. And they should be, I think, thought about like that.
Yeah, I like that answer. It's interesting just to see from the outside kind of the way in which cannabis has, exploded onto the market, and it's kind of seemed to find, a lot of pitfalls and a lot of nuance and a lot of difficulties sort of emerging as a commodified product in a sort of way. I don't think it's supposed to, like, in my opinion, and I'm a glorified truck driver, but I just don't think that these substances want to be commodified on some level. Like, there's no real way to do it. And when we start commodifying them, it lets loose a torrent of bad actors, and all of a sudden you got Art Linkletter yelling from the back room like, hey, look at this thing, and everything goes back in the box. Is that too dark of an outlook?
I think it's a very pragmatic outlook.
Me too.
If ill-intentioned is a strong concept, but less informed, more more about the money than about the safety or efficacy, right, or something like that. Bad outcomes lead to bad story. The story is what drives everything.
Yeah.
So if the story is someone took psilocybin and it was a pilot, and then he wanted to commit suicide in the airplane, right, that is what everyone thinks.
Yeah.
So it can hijack, no pun intended there.
Well played.
The story and become the story even when it's not.
Yeah.
So I think that bad decisions, harmful decisions, antisocial decisions, intentional acts of criminality can sully the underlying reality of psychedelic consumption. So, but that's just who we are.
Yeah.
So you address the criminality, you address the things that are harmful, you address the person who says, I'm a shaman, come do this thing with me, and then molest people, right? It wasn't about the psychedelic.
Right.
That was the tool in furtherance of a crime. That's different.
Yeah.
Someone who preys on, the religious interest, the personal wellness interest, creates a vulnerability in a relationship dynamic, a power dynamic. Someone is under the influence of a substance.
Yeah.
And someone is there and can do bad things.
Yeah.
That person should face legal consequences for those behaviors, and the greater community should not allow for this to happen either. So I think that's that's what the communities can do, is self-govern.
Yeah.
And do things, act with the greater society's interests in mind when you're doing these things, and recognize that though you may have a closeted relationship experience, these things, especially as communities evolve and grow, so something centered around this, or with it very well integrated into its community makeup and intentional community, should be very reflective of pro-social or healthy behaviors, and their that they are a representative of a broad from diverse viewpoints. And
yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you. I've been talking to quite a few people in the iboga space, and I am just blown away by the success rate of people that are using iboga to get over addiction. It's first off, it blows my mind to think that could even be considered no medicinal value, like that when you start seeing them walk away from Suboxone or heroin or even fentanyl in a very short amount of time, I might add. Like it blows my mind to see that kind of success rate, and I'm so excited to see it happening out there on some level.
It shouldn't be a surprise that the antidote to the drugs is the natural medicines.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of natural medicines that are showing a lot of promise in the addiction space, and a lot of history in different countries where their consumption is focused on addiction recovery and things like that. So just what's happening is we just view it through our lens, and we want stats and proof and FDA, and there's all kinds of things that we need in our system and our government to say something is useful, it has a medical value, but all you can say is that our system is broken, and too slow to recognize true medical value. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why is that the case? And I think your listeners will have their own answers on that.
Yeah. You guys, you have a beautiful command of the English language, Eric. And I'm curious, sometimes I think we get trapped in language. Like we have all these labels we give people, especially when it comes to diagnosis, or you look at the DSM, and, even with something like PTSD, like post-traumatic stress disorder, could things be better if we just change the language to like post-traumatic growth opportunity? Maybe putting these labels on people allow them to be stuck in an identity, and then they're on this treadmill of like an industry that wants to provide them with, patches instead of cures.
Yeah, it's true. That's a truth. Language in as expressive power limits and excludes. If I say what something is, I'm excluding all other possibilities. If I define something, I'm limiting its meaning to that definition. Language is our ability to label things that are just are. They're occurrences, they're happenings. and then we use language to give meaning, symbolic meaning, and then we accept it, and then we form communities around that. And here we are today speaking English and how many hundreds of languages in
Right.
So yes, don't miss the substance for the form. Right? The form is the word, and the substance is the actual, which isn't limited. It's unlimited in many instances. So I think we should reflect on language and meaning, and it's very in a regulated space, which we spend a lot of our time in our firm.
Yeah.
Language and meaning and key terms can mean the difference between compliant or not. Can mean the difference between illegal or not illegal, right? So we have to be very mindful of our language and word use, and I think it's good to reflect on language as a great limiter, an excluder in addition to an expressor.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful answer. And so much around it's interesting. We talked earlier about AI and psychedelics, but I think both of them have an incredible influence on language. You know, you find yourself up against a tragedy, and maybe you use psychedelics to help you through that tragedy. You find yourself seeing language in a different way, which is weird, like seeing language or seeing yourself in a different way. Do you think this is, like you had spoke earlier about this convergence of all these things? Do you think that we're going to be moving into a new sort of language to understand all these things?
Undoubtedly so. You know, linguists, that's the word, right? Linguists would know more about this, but it's my understanding that there's a great concern about the rapid escalation of AI in its ability to, I don't know, transition language so that some languages will be gone. So that some languages will disappear as we continue to converge all data information into these language processing systems that then will express it back in how many languages, right? So I think that language loss is important to reflect on from a cultural identity loss perspective. But language will always change in a holistic sense. It has always been changing. It's in a constant state of change. The way we talk today, if someone, 1,000 years from now were to watch this video, good Lord help us. But if that were to happen, they might not understand us because we would be speaking in a way that's primitive in its evolution, because language continues just the same as if we were to read Old English in its true forms and hear it, we wouldn't understand a word of it. And yet that's the lineage of how we got to now. So AI is going to accelerate this thing in a lot of ways, and that has consequences that are beyond. Now on the psychedelic side, the experience is outside of language.
Yeah.
That's why there's a great word, ineffable. You've used it. The ineffable experience, the experience that can't be described. Well, it could be described, and it is described all the time.
Yeah.
But there's an innateness to it that it's just a raw happening, a raw knowingness, relational, emotional thing happening there that is different than every other way that we experience reality. And therefore, we don't have the language to describe all of it and its meaning, except to say that there's real meaning. And then we use words like connection and relationship and empathy. And so the values come through. But you wouldn't want to limit the experience itself in a few words, because that gets to the greater what's happening here. Now we're into the metaphysics and the religiosity of it,
right?
Which can be a fun other conversation.
Yeah, it's such a deep experience, the language of experience, and how do you translate that into something that people can understand? Sometimes I feel AI is teaching us how to communicate meaningfully. On some level, when you look back at all of the things that we have going on, there's all this side monologuing, or people have different definition of words, and no one ever sits down and says, let's define our words before we have this conversation. And so there's so less meaning that gets moved in between the conversation. Like there's no wonder things are so diluted and cataclysmic at times.
Yeah. Everyone just take a pause.
Yeah, COVID. I think that's what happened.
Chill the F out for a little bit. You know? Like, yeah, I think we're all living on one planet. Some of us want to go to another planet. Some of us might be from another planet. But we are all here, and we don't have the answers. And there's not one right way. And we don't live in a real, what's the word? Bipolar. We don't have a bipolar life. You know, it's not this or that.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't live in a linear straight line.
Yeah.
It's all imagination. That's just the constructs that we've come up with to explain it to ourselves. So it's the story we're telling so that we can continue our propagating into the future. But all we are is just experiencing life here, just being here. And the sole purpose, I think, is awareness. To be aware that we're here, to be aware that our intentions create the reality that we're experiencing, and that if we were more intentional and our actions reflected that intentionality towards healthier output, that we would have healthier output. And healthier is a very broad and holistic term, and I mean it in every way possible.
I love it. Eric, we already blew past an hour, man. Like I feel like our conversation is just getting started, man. It's it always happens in the midst of an awesome conversation, man. But as we're
thank you for the space to do it. A lot of time in between our last conversation.
Way too long. Too long.
But you know, this is the way it goes. I sit here and I think about these things, and I reflect on the people I'm working with in a lot of different spaces, whether it's psychedelics or the religious space or hemp beverages or cannabis or AI. And I do pull out patterns of commonality, you know. But the most important thing is that I understand that we're all human beings, that we don't have the answers, that we're finding our way through, and that my role is to be a guide in a lot of ways and help people make impact in the world. And that's what our firm is for. It's an impact firm. And this transitional era can be very scary and volatile. And I think that we need good guides in a lot of different layers with a steady hand and a poise to get us through it. And that's what I try to do. And I appreciate
doing an awesome job
about that with you.
Yeah. Where can people find you? What do you got coming up? What are you excited about?
Oh, they can find me all the time. Just shoot me a note. I talk to a lot of people. I'm very, I have a real life outside of the virtual, and it's taking care of my family, and I have a couple of, small ones, and I don't get out into like conference scenes and things like that as much. But I like to connect with people. So I think the best way is just to, shoot me a note, send me an email, send me a LinkedIn connect. And if you're doing something you think I could be helpful or my firm can be helpful, then, happy to explore it.
Nice. And that's at holonlaw.com.
Yep. Holon Law Partners.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Transcending.
That's what it's all about. It's such an interesting time. I love talking to you, man. You're an awesome individual, and I love the insights and helping me understand a little bit, and the listeners understand a little bit where we're at, where we're going. So hang on briefly afterwards. But to everybody within the sound of my voice and everybody that participated today, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go down to the show notes, check out Eric, reach out to him. He's an incredible human. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha.